I've given up. That's right, I've given up on the American dream. I used to dream about it in the States. To me, it meant raising kids who are happy, healthy, and thriving, but America is just not a good fit for that anymore. But what country is? China. That's right. Now, I'm going for something I call the Chinese dream. It's BeeRose in China, and I'm gonna tell you the reasons why.
The first point is infrastructure. America is living in the past while China is living in the future. If I were living in America, my kids would be dependent on me to drive them literally everywhere because America is designed totally for cars. But in China, I can trust that my kid can take the subway, buses, trains, use bike lanes, walk on sidewalks. In America, the subway is outdated, unsafe, dirty, and not enjoyable at all. There are very few bike lanes, very few buses, and the sidewalks are far and few. In Beijing, I can feel safe to send my kids out and let them become wonderful, independent individuals. But, oh wait, are they safe doing that? It brings me to my next point, safety. So as for safety, I want to live in a place where I can feel like I can send my kids out the door and let them play with their friends, even when it's dark. And I see this really happening in the city of Beijing. Kids are out and about when it's dark and there are no parents around and they look happy and carefree. But how can I really know that my kids won't get scooped up by some psycho in a white van? Well, if you look around the city, there are people literally everywhere. That means there are going to be eyes on my kids no matter where they go. Let's compare this to my childhood. When I was growing up, my mom used to let my friend and I walk down the street to rent videos. There were no people really at all. So when we'd walk down the street, nobody's watching us. We don't have like the neighborhood protecting us. I remember one time when we were walking down the street, a woman ran up to us and she was frantic. She's like, girls, you need to be very careful. There's a man in front of you and he keeps looking behind him at you both. You need to detour. You need to go somewhere else. Do not run into him. I think that day we ran into a guardian angel. We were very lucky because usually we never saw anyone. So in Beijing, I can feel way more comfortable because people are watching. But what if there aren't? On the rare occasion, maybe it's very, very late, there are cameras literally everywhere. And Beijing has cameras that cover 100% of the public space. Can you believe it? Literally 100%. That's wild. My next point is racism. I'm going to put a screenshot up that went viral from Reddit. If you want to pause it and read it, you can, but if you don't, it is about an Asian kid who grew up in a predominantly white town in the States, and when he went to school, he got made fun of literally every single day. So no one wanted to be his friend because he was constantly made fun of. In the States, I personally saw this happen before my eyes, and I wish that I would have had the bravery to stand up for these kids, but back then I was just a kid as well. Also, adults are pretty hateful towards other races and cultures in the States. I have also seen this, so I can attest to this. In China, although people call me Lao Wai or Wai Goren, it has never been made out of hate. It's always made out of curiosity. Probably the people who have said that to me have never seen a foreigner in their lives before. I want my kids to grow up in a place where they can feel like they can be comfortable and be accepted. Also in school, I want my kids to feel like they can be in an environment where they flourish. There is also something else that can affect the school environment, which brings me to my next point, respectful kids in China. 1,600 years ago, a book was written in China and it featured the idiom 尊师重道, which means respect your teachers. In America, no such idiom exists and no such practices. In school, I saw kids misbehave terribly and also backtalk to the teacher. And while this happened, all the other kids in the classroom were focused on that one bad kid instead of what's really important, which is what the teacher is saying and trying to teach. In China, kids are so respectful, and that means that they can focus on what really matters, which is the content. So with my kids growing up in China, when they're in school, they can really learn and absorb things and not have these distractions. Now, in China, in school and not in school, my kids will be immersed in the language, which brings me to my next point, learning Chinese or more in China. The couple right now is taking their wedding shots, and these random kids have decided to help them with their bubble guns. Bubble guns to the rescue! That's very sweet. Chinese is the hardest language to learn ever. So there is no better way to learn the language than to be in China and be immersed, to make friends here, to go to school here, and so on. My kids are Chinese, so it is crucial that they know Chinese. And while they are young, they are literally like sponges for learning languages. It's so fabulous. So everything that they see, everything that they hear, they're going to just soak in. I know ABCs in the States who have fabulous English skills, but their Chinese is lacking very much. But it's probably because the resources in America are just not comparable to those in China. In my hometown, there were 2 languages that you could learn, French and Spanish, and nothing else. But in Beijing, you can learn several languages here. It is so fabulous. Why? It's because this environment is so international, which brings me to my next point, how international Beijing and China is in general. In Beijing alone, there are roughly 200,000 foreigners, and I am constantly meeting people from all over the world. In the States, it's considered a mixing pot of people, but the thing is, when people immigrate to the States, they find their own little community, they settle in it, and then they don't really venture out. But in Beijing, if you meet a foreigner as another foreigner, you literally can become friends just on the basis of that. Like, you're a foreigner, I'm a foreigner, let's be friends. So I think that's really fabulous. And also, due to having such a huge international population, there are 100,000 restaurants in Beijing that are international, and they are very authentic. So I'm literally trying food from all over the world all the time. This is what I want for my kids, to feel like they're so connected to the rest of the world while living in one place. Beijing is very foreigner friendly, and also bringing me to my next point, it's very kid friendly. In China, malls are thriving. In the States, malls are dying. And in China, the malls that you go to are huge, and they always have one floor totally dedicated to just kids stuff. And also in those malls, there are fabulous food options that also feature kids stuff. In the States, you can take your kids to, like, I don't know, a playground or just go out in your yard. What if the weather is bad? What if it's cold? It's nice to have options, you feel?
Well, they're doing the VR thing.
And the best part about these kid-friendly places is that they are super affordable, which brings me to my next point, which is cost of living. The cost of living in China is very affordable. Things cost about half the price of what they would in the West. This means, in general, you can spend more, do more, eat more, see more, and so on. And also in China, I haven't felt like I have to constantly check my bank account in case I go into the negatives. I don't have that anxiety anymore. And I think every hardworking adult deserves that peace of mind feeling, knowing that they can spend and not feel like they are on a super tight budget. Now, speaking of doing more, this brings me to my next point, which is affordable travel to fantastic destinations. I wanted to give you guys an example of how affordable the travel can really be. From Beijing to Sanya, for a round trip ticket, it can cost you 1,143 RMB, and that's the distance of 1,563 miles, which is roughly equal to the distance of traveling from New Orleans to New York. And as for hotels, you can stay at a place like the Hilton for about $80 a night, but if you want to stay somewhere else that's cheaper, go ahead, because there are tons of options. As you're traveling within China, you will be richly immersed in the culture and the language, the people. And this brings me to my next point, culture. China has over 5,000 years of history. Living in China, being Chinese, my kids get to really experience that in its entirety. And even if my kids weren't Chinese, they could still experience it by living here. Living in the States, I always felt like the States was just lacking in historical richness. Here, there is no lack of that. There are so many wonderful traditions and cultures that I learn about, and it's all different from the north to the south. Now, the last point is very specific to my hometown, but that is there are less natural disasters in Beijing. When I was growing up, I faced hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. Even one of the deadliest hurricanes to ever hit the United States, which was Hurricane Katrina. And I remember thinking, why on earth would anybody live in a place like this? Every time we would evacuate, I would worry about if my house would even still be there. And this was even a legitimate fear because people lost their entire houses in the storms, especially Hurricane Katrina. In Beijing, there may be an occasional earthquake, but nobody really feels it. And in general, we're not having to evacuate and worrying about if our home will still be there the next day. This is a far more stable environment to raise kids. Hurricanes are really scary. Hurricane Katrina, we had no power for 4 weeks straight. That was wild. And also there were tons of looters. It was such a scary time to live through. I'm very thankful for the stability of Beijing. That's all, you guys. If you like this video, like it, comment, and please subscribe because it helps so much. If you want to see something in particular, just leave a comment and let me know. I read all of them. All right, guys, until next time. Bye-bye, 再见.